Hello. I feel like I say this every single video, but it has been a minute. It's been over a month now since I started my new job, and it has kicked my butt. So I have not filmed or written that much in this past however long, but I did spend a lot of time reflecting, and I thought that it would be a really good time to go over just like an evolution video of my chapter one. It has changed a lot since I started to write. And one great thing that I've noticed is that every single time I go back to edit it or revisit it, it does improve. And I can sense that I've become a better writer over time. And I use it kind of as my testing ground for changes that I need to make in the draft. Like, is my voice really coming through? How am I going to reflect changes that I make to the Rose, my main character's character motivation, and yada yada. But okay, before we get into it, hi, I'm Jen. I'm a writer based in LA. I'm also a corporate girly, as you might have gathered. And I'm currently working through my first novel, which is going under the title of Oath Whip in the meantime. I'm really bad at describing the work, so we'll just hop into it. If you know, you know. If you don't, you may or may not figure it out through my ramblings. Okay, cool. So let's start. All right, so I pre-wrote some notes for this one, so hopefully I will stay on my talking tracks. But I have three versions of my draft save. There was the newest one with some edits on it. There is a middle ground one that I wrote in February, and then there's this latest one. There were tons of edits in between because I edit as I go. I can't help it. So I didn't track all of those, but there's a feature on Scrivener where you can, it's kind of like a time capsule. You can just take a, I don't know what you call it, a snapshot of your current draft, and then as you make edits and you take another snapshot, it'll actually track what changed. So it'll have like cross out of words you've removed and like edits and so on and so forth. If you have Scrivener and you haven't used this yet, I highly encourage you to do so, especially between drafts, because you can reference them pretty easily. And if maybe there's some stuff you want to bring back or what have you, or you want to do a recap video, be very helpful. So let's get started. So my zero draft. My chapter one actually was completely different. This was back when I suddenly, like 2 months prior, was like, I'm gonna write a novel. I did crash courses online on how to write a novel. I had ideas, and I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. Prior to that, I only really did short stories, so this was going to be a very far-reaching project out of the realm of what I'd ever written before. I'm just saying I didn't really know what I was doing, but I had a lot of passion and motivation. So my original draft zero, the opening scene was completely different. My inciting incident was always the same. It was going to be Rose's brothers fall into debt, and Rose gets caught in the swirl of that and trying to help them pay off this debt. And it was always going to be delivered by this guy named Hongdu. In the original zero draft, the scene was basically Rose and Tazetta get home and there's stuff missing. So they're like, what the hell? And they realize that because their brothers have had gambling problems before, they're like, maybe they stole their stuff. So they're running to the market, trying to cut them off and confront the brothers. This, in a lot of ways, was not the best way into the story, I realized over time, because it was just full throttle, really action paced, and you didn't really know who the characters were yet. You didn't really care whether they fell into debt or not. You just kind of were like, okay, I'm being brought on for the ride. So with my second major take, like my actual first draft, I realized I really wanted to slow this opening scene down. I wanted to focus a lot more on Rose as a main character as well, and build her up a little bit in this opening scene and have it start kind of like at her normal day and then build up to a climax and then go from there. So that was a major change that I made. Since then, that scene has not changed that much. in that Rose is at the beach. Okay, let me set the stage. So throughout the versions I had since then, it kind of was the same in terms of what happens in when if you were to be like filming the scene. Rose is at the beach. She is diving for sea urchins and seaweed. She is coming back to the beach, and there's this man that is by her fire, and she wants to avoid him. And it turns out to be Hongdu, who is delivering the news that her brothers have fallen into this debt, and it kicks off the rest of the story. Um, so between draft zero and my draft one, I learned a lot more about craft. I leaned into reading as a writer a little bit more to understand like what about this opening scene is working? Like why is it working? And I also bought a book. I don't remember what it's called, but it was literally just about openings, like how to hook readers and stuff like that. So I tried to put that into work. Um, I also wanted to kind of build a connection to her siblings earlier on, and I made the day more significant where it's like, why does it have to be this day that you're opening the scene on? I made it into the twins' birthday. So if you know anything about Korean culture and Korean food, it's very traditional to eat seaweed soup on your birthday. It's like something that's really good for nursing mothers as well, but there's a lot of folk tales about this, but allegedly people saw that whales will eat seaweed when they're pregnant or after having babies, and so it passed off to Korean people starting to eat seaweed, and you just eat seaweed soup on your birthday. So contextually, if you're familiar with that tradition, you'll know exactly why she's doing that, why she's looking for seaweed. But if you're not familiar, you won't. So that was one of the challenges that I had where I don't want to like baby people and explain every single Korean element that comes up in this book. But I did want to make it easier for people to make that logistical leap without having to answer the question all the time. But I digress. So I made it into more of an important day just to make it more interesting as well. One other big change that I made about Hongdu was I made Hongdu into Rose's ex as a vehicle to kind of set the stage for her like past wounds from that relationship, her attitude to romance, her desire to or her secret desire to have a family, to be with somebody, but there's all these reasons why she feels like she can't, and she has some trust issues, all of that stuff. So that was a really good vehicle for that. Previously, he was just some scammy guy who owns the debt. She kind of knew him from when she first moved into the city. Okay, so one challenge that I ran into that was really important for this to work was that Hongdu didn't know that her brothers are her brothers. Part of it is because Rose is full Kuri, which is the Korea coded country in my novel, whereas her brothers are half. They share a mom, and they're half Vulgari. So they have like lighter coloring. They don't look like she's very tall, and they're kind of shorter, all this stuff. So he didn't make that leap, but also she just didn't really share that much information about her family when they were together. They have a complicated relationship, and I needed to make it complicated in order to add more drama, but also to make sure that, yeah, why, like, he wouldn't know they were her brothers because she never told him that she even had siblings. Um, and that kind of goes into her personality and fears as well. I also wanted to bake in a better way for her to show her powers. So in this world, there are magical oaths. And when you make a magical oath or a vow, you're bound to that oath. And if you break it, you experience something called oath sickness, which will result in death 100% of the time, basically, unless whoever you like wronged forgives you. And that's their understanding of how oaths work. Rose has this secret power to see oath lines. So when she touches someone skin to skin and she looks at them in their eyes, she can then see physical manifestations of people's oaths and magic and all this stuff. So I wanted it to be introduced in that opening scene as well. So she basically, when she hears that Hongdu is like talking about the debt or implying something about this debt, she kind of grabs him and realizes that it's her brother Gray that has fallen into this debt lender's oath with him. And what that also accomplishes is one, it reveals Rose's powers, but two, it also adds to the complication of her relationship with Hongdu, where as he's like a criminal. He was a petty criminal when they met, and it wasn't a huge deal. But as he started to kind of climb up in the hierarchy, he was gathering these debts, and his actions were leading to people like falling into servitude for his boss, like running away, living in fear, all these things. So he was becoming more and more of this bad guy. But she was in love with him. So she was like, had this conflict of, I can literally see that he is falling more and more into this path, and she couldn't reconcile that. Whatever, it adds all this complications. I had some edits in between that first major edit and where I am now. Something that I changed. Originally, Rose's power was only supposed to work in the eyes, so she would see the oath signs in the eyes. I was like, that's impractical. Pupils are tiny. She would have to be like this close to their face to see these levels of layers. So I made it manifest more around the person to be more visual. I also set up a lot more introspection. So I really wanted to squeeze in not all, but a lot of Rosie's fears and her wound and some like foreshadowing of where the story was going to go up front. So I do mention like her age and how it does weigh on her. She's 31, she's getting older, she's not married, all those things. She's not as accomplished as she had wanted to be by that time. I reorganized things to be a little bit smoother, and I also split up this chapter. Originally, it was like the beach scene, the inciting incident of Hongdu. She goes home, she confronts her brothers, and then they decide what they're going to do about it. I cut that up into two. So now it's just focused on this conversation with Hongdu in chapter one, and chapter two is when she goes home and confronts her brothers. I think that it just reads better that way, and I want to keep my chapters somewhat short so it's easy to read. I don't really know, short is a relative term. I would say maybe less than 2,000 words is what I'm trying to do, like around 13 to 1,800 words. So I had needed to cut it off there in order to make that happen. That was basically the major stuff that happened. There was like some massaging, made things flow better, all that. And then that brings me to this latest version. So, okay, the power of reading slash vocal training before you write is real. I fell in love with A Song of Achilles 2 months ago, a month ago, recently. I listened to the audiobook. It is such a good audiobook. I don't know why that narrator doesn't have more work. I need him to be doing more stuff, so I'm putting that out in the universe. And right now I'm making my way through Circe, which is also written by Emmanuel Miller. They're so good, y'all. So when I read that or listened to both of those, I was like, this is how I want my writing to be. Like, I wanted to have a lot more atmosphere. Circe does have a lot more exposition than Song of Achilles, but I want there to be a lot more natural world building. I want you to be invested in these characters, a lot more introspection, but it still doesn't feel super slow. So taking that, lessons from that, I rewrote or edited my latest chapter one. And there's such a stark difference between this middle version where I was like, this is great. Like, this is where it needs to be. I just need to massage it, to the choices that I made with this latest go. And it makes me feel really optimistic about the future of this draft, where I've been putting words down and feeling not great about them. I know that I will keep getting better. So my battery is going to overheat, or the camera's going to overheat in a second. I'm going to take a tiny little break. And in that time, I'm going to pull up some samples to reference later, just to show how much it changed between drafts. Oops. All right, so be right back. I am going to quickly read through the beginning part of each major version of the draft. Mind you, my latest draft I literally just wrote yesterday and today, so there's a lot of massaging. This is for demonstration purposes only. Okay, so draft 1. My first line hasn't really changed. I might change it later, but it's just like a good starting point for me. So draft 1, Rosé hadn't noticed at first, too focused on rooting out creatures hidden amongst the kelp, but at some point a man had chosen to ruin her morning. Summerlight doused her face as she surfaced, loosing a high-pitched breath across the water. Her cracked gourd protested nearby, glugging feebly as it bobbed against cold, glittering waves. There was no point in delaying her return any longer. One more sea urchin and the poor thing would turn on her, taking her entire catch with it. Felix and Gray are probably up by now, she thought, glaring at the man settled beside her fire. She just hoped he wasn't going to creep, or potentially worse, someone she knew. All too soon, her weightless form became solid once more. And da-da-da. So basically, she notices that this man is sat beside her fire, and she's like, my brothers are probably up by now, and then she's on the beach already. There's talk about her gourd. There wasn't actually a version before this. It got lost, so I won't be able to show you that, but the gourd thing was kind of new. I do a lot of showing of the beach and like the vibes, the water's cold, all of this stuff, and she had been like trying to wait him out and she hasn't. So that's not version 0 and not even version 1, but version 1 of what I have. And then in February, I had another go at it. Now it's updated to this. Same first line. Rosé hadn't noticed at first, too focused on rooting out creatures hidden amongst the kelp, but at some point, a man had chosen to ruin her morning. Summerlight doused her face as she surfaced one last time, her high-pitched exhale skating across the water like a seabird. There was no use putting her return off any longer. One more sea urchin and her poor gourd would turn on her, taking her entire catch with it. I'm late for breakfast, she lamented as she swam to shore, glaring at the man settled beside her fire. He looked worried from afar, smoking from a long thin pipe with his black hair scraped into a top knot, but the cut of his navy top and trousers were foreign. Whatever the case, she hoped he wasn't a creep, and perhaps even worse, someone she knew. All too soon, her weightless form became solid once more. So I added more description of the man, just to give people something to look at, and also bake in the fact that, okay, Kuri, that's probably what she is, maybe not, but just introducing that term, and also a hint of like the internationality of the city that she lives in. I made some other minor changes as well. I took Felix and Gray out altogether, so it's like I'm late for breakfast, and you're like, why is breakfast important? You have no hint of that at all in this version. And then the gourd too. I think that's hard to visualize, honestly. Like, what does the gourd have to do with the sea urchins? The context there is that the gourd is used kind of like a buoy. That's how divers used to keep their nets up back in the day. Now they use actual buoys. But you probably won't get that. Like, you probably won't understand that just from reading this. So now my latest version that I updated yesterday/today. Same first line. Rosé hadn't noticed at first, too focused on rooting out sea creatures hidden amongst the kelp, but at some point a man had chosen to ruin her morning. Just great, she thought, glaring at the man sat by her fire. I'm late enough as it is. For a second, she considered waiting him out, but the thought vanished as quickly as it had arrived. She had mouths to feed, urchins to sell, and important matters to tend to. Her brothers were probably up by now, and no man would make her late to preparing their birthday soup. And so, with her fists clenched around her sickle, Rosé sliced through the waves like a seal through the surf. She knew Yangchun's waters like she knew her own breath. Though the sea was still cold enough to draw shivers when she got in 2 short moons it would become a warm broth, thick and cloudy with sea spawn, so on and so forth. And then it kind of goes back to where she grew up and how there's like a magical element to this, and it introduces her grandmother as well early on. So it's actually her great grand aunt, who she calls Halmi. Halmi is like a nickname for grandmother in Korean, but Halmi is a pretty significant force in her life. They are no longer here with her, but I introduced Halmi here in a memory because she comes up in chapter 2 where Rose has a keepsake of her grandmother's. It's this tiger tooth necklace that her grandmother gave to her, or Helmi gave to her, and she doesn't want to give it to the brothers when the brothers are like, you could sell that to make a lot of money. And you kind of like feel for her. She does have some like flashbacks in that moment, but I wanted to plant that seed earlier so you kind of already have this attachment to Helmi as well from this memory. Yeah, so there's like one, two, three, like 3 paragraphs that I added of that before it goes into all too soon she reached the shore. All too soon she reached the shore and her weightless form became solid once more. Period. Blah 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 blah. So it did change, that front bit did change a lot. It changes kind of the tone of the story a lot too, I think. So note some of the changes. I moved in more of Rose's interiority and tried to give her a lot more personality. I made it very clear that she's trying to make birthday soup for her brothers, and that's kind of why she was out there. I also added specificity, like the sickle. Before, she was kind of holding a knife way later on, and I wanted it to be more specific because she's using the sickle to get seaweed. And I also added that, like a seal through the surf, to show that she's a really great swimmer, as well as her kind of like expertise in the water. She's very comfortable swimming. She's very in tune with marine life because it is part of her livelihood. And she's kind of no nonsense in certain ways, being like, I don't have time for this. I need to just like deal with this weird man that's looking at me. I think it's an improvement. Let me know what you think. But I love seeing these types of process videos where I can see the evolution of people's writing. Like, what are people thinking? What is the intention behind the edits that people are making? I hope that this was interesting for you, that you have a better sense of my story and Rose as a character and my process. Let me know your thoughts, and let me know too, like, how much has your chapter 1 changed over time? Like, have you seen any like differences in your writing approach as you gain more experience? Are there any novels that you like to read for vocal training? What is the book that you read recently that's kind of given you a lot of food for thought in your writing? And that's it for now. I hope you all have had a great week. Or I hope you all have had a great month since I last spoke to you. And I hope we can catch up soon. Anyway, bye.